So now we're going to get ready to print this sheet of lino. Okay, so the first thing to do is to clean your whole working space. Okay, so dust it down, get the dustpan and brush. All of these little blue chippings, you want to make sure that even the smallest little bits like this are gone from your work area. Okay, because otherwise what's going to happen once you put the ink on the inking plate, all of those little bits of dust and stuff is going to find its way into that ink, and then that's going to affect how your print goes. Okay, that's the first thing to do. The second thing we're going to do is use some fairy liquid or washing up liquid to just clean down the surface of this printing block. Okay, the reason for that is we have been handling it. There's pencil marks on it, there might be other sort of marks, there's probably bits of grease and whatever that you've picked up. There's the grease from your hands that's always there, and that is all going to affect how these lino block and printing inks sit on top of your lino printing block. Okay, so we want to just make sure that this is really nice, really clean. Okay, so I am going to do that now quickly. So that's it, that's my lino printing block cleaned. While I'm here, I'm just going to clean down my desk again and just make sure that while I was cleaning it, any little chippings that come off are now gone from my desk. The next thing that we need to do the inking and the printing is these clear sheets of acrylic. Now the other thing to make sure that's clean is the roller itself. Okay, so it might mean that you might need to just go and freshly wash it to make sure that it is clean. I'm just going to rub it down and make sure that it's as clean as I can get it. Now this might seem like a lot of work, all this cleaning, but what it's going to do is make your actual inking process a lot quicker and a lot easier for you. So that's always a bonus. Okay, so the little bit of time that you spend cleaning is going to be well and truly worth it in the longer term. So what I got here is my red lino printing ink. I've picked crimson. So what you want to do is, as I said, this is going to turn in eventually to a 2-layer print, and that means in 2 colours. So I'm going to use red and black, but what you want to make sure is that you always start off with the lighter colour. So if you're using black or brown or even a dark blue, leave those until the 2nd layer, okay, and start with the lighter colour. Okay, so I'm going to start here with my red. And the first thing that I'm going to do is put just a little line of it across the top here. Always put your lid back on straight away so that you don't end up with a big mess everywhere. And what I'm going to do is get my lino printing roller or my brayer and put it into that ink and move that ink right down my printing plate. Okay, now the next thing that I'm going to do is, you'll see that your brayer or your roller has 2 little finger indents here. Hopefully you can see that. Can you see them? So there and there. Put your 2 fingers onto those 2 places, and what you want to do is straight on press down really hard and push all of that ink right up to the top. Okay? You do not want a lot of ink down here. You just want a little bit. Now, I'm just going to do that again. Get all that ink up to the top. And then I'm going to come down here. So this time, listen carefully to the kind of tacky noise that you can hear as I'm rolling. The other thing I want you to do is look at the shapes that's on the ink now. You'll see there's these kind of long lines, and see what they look like just in a second. Now, you can see that those long lines, especially here where there's the darker blue underneath, you'll see that they're quite shorter now. They're more, they're not as long, the little sections, as they were. So that's just because there's less ink on the plate. The other thing that you'll hear is this nice kind of tacky sound with the roller, and that just makes sure that you know that there's the right amount of ink. Okay, I want to show you now just what happens if there's too much ink. So if I bring down all that ink, there's my little bit of lino, or it's actually a thread, I don't know where that has come from. So if there's too much ink, that ink won't be the same. Okay, you've got grainy lines here, which hopefully you can see. Not sure that you can. You see those grainy lines, they're quite long. So you see them, they're very long, very thick, and quite far apart. Okay, so that's a very clear sign that there's way too much ink down through that. So just to get rid of it again, my 2 fingers down on those 2 dimples, push straight down and get it up to the top. Okay, so I've got my ink there mainly up to top again. Do our rolling, and we've got that nice tacky sound. It takes absolutely no pressure at all to roll that roller up and down there. It's not getting stuck with lots of ink or anything. And just let me show you under the light. You'll see that those lines are a lot closer together. They're a lot shorter, especially here at the side. Towards the middle there's always a little bit more ink than there does be at the edges, but you'll see that there's a big difference. Okay, so that's what you want. I'm just going to get a bit more up, and there we go, we're ready to go. Now, to get the ink onto the surface, it's quite straightforward. We're going to just roll the ink onto the surface of the block. The first time that you put ink onto the block, it's going to take up quite a bit of ink. Okay, so that is probably going to take another roll. Now, I'm going to lift that up so you can just see a little bit better, but you'll see that the whole surface of that printing block has been covered in red ink. There is no sections where, say, there's ink that's not like sitting nicely on top. It's all sitting nicely. If you didn't clean that printing block before you inked it up, you're likely to have splodgy marks and bits where the ink won't sit. Okay, so it would be like the equivalent of if you've a well waxed car and then it rains, the rainwater is going to sit in bubbles and it's going to want to come off your car, whereas if your car is a bit dirtier and maybe not so well waxed and polished, the water's happy enough to kind of sit there and use the dirt to stay there. Okay, so what we want is the dirty car effect, not the waxed and polished. Okay, so that ink is all happily sitting there on the surface of the lino block. The other thing that can happen is if you put on too much ink, you see the way I can still see my nice blue lines, okay, and I can see all of those cuts. If you put on too much ink, what's going to happen is the ink is going to flow from the surface where you haven't cut into all of those channels and into all those cuts. So you want to watch out for that. That's one reason why we're really careful not to put on too much ink. The other thing that can happen is you can see, let me see if there's somewhere where it has happened. So you see where lines aren't that deep. Like maybe here, it's not really the same thing, but it's the line is quite narrower here and it's not that deep. So you can see that the ink is slowly kind of starting to slip in there. Whereas if you look in this section, the lines are about the same thickness, but they're really deeply carved, so there's no ink going to sit down there. Okay, so just be careful that when you are cutting, that you cut deep enough that you can actually, if you run your fingers over it, you can feel that there's two levels. Okay, if you can't feel two levels, you haven't gone deep enough. Now, so the next step is printing this onto a sheet of paper. So when you're choosing paper to print on, what you want is a nice sheet of paper that is nice and smooth. Okay, so for this type of ink printing, you want to stay away from say textured papers that you might find with watercolor papers, that type of thing. What we usually use is just paper for photocopying, and it works really well. If you don't have any problems with it. So once you have your sheets, what you want to do is make sure that the desk underneath is clean. So if your rollers kind of hit off any sections of the desk, just wipe it off. But the next step then would be to try to centrally place your lino block on the sheet. So you can see that I've slipped my fingers in under and just made sure it was equal-ish distance on both sides. And you can see the outline of my block here. Okay, so all I'm going to do now is rub the surface of my sheet of paper. You can use it with the flat palm of your hand. You can do it with a closed fist. And if you don't want to use your hand, you can find a clean dry roller, not one with ink in it, and just roll it over the surface, and that will work as well. Now, there's some tricks here to be done, perhaps. Let's just see how that's printing. So this sheet is printing okay, it's not so bad. We've got nice even coverage of ink. So I would be happy enough to lift that off because I'm going to overprint a lot of these areas, okay? But if, say, your ink hasn't kind of covered up a corner, or, you know, if there's parts like this that you're maybe not so happy with, that you want a bit more ink on, what you can do is peel back half the sheet. Just roll some more ink onto your roller, peel back the sheet, and just apply another layer of ink. So rub that again, peel down the other side. When you are doing this, just be careful that when you are rolling the ink on, that you don't accidentally hit the roller off your sheet of paper, because that is going to affect how your finished print turns out. Okay, so I'm going to roll it off from the side first of all to make sure that those two bits have met in the middle, and that's it. Whoa. Okay, so there's my first layer of my lino print done. Okay, now important things here are how many of these do you need to do. Okay, so the number of these that you need to do depends. If you're doing a single colour print, you need about 6 prints. If you're going to overprint these in another colour, you want somewhere between 6 to 10, just to make sure that if something goes wrong or if you misplaced a lino, that you have another one to back up. Okay, you want to end up with 2 really good ones to present in your final presentation in your portfolio under section 4. You want another few to present in the other sections as well. Okay, and if there's a section that you need to do as well, that, you know, focuses on design problems and how you have overcome them. If you have had any sort of little design issue while you're doing this, take one of these lino prints, put it into your notebook and make a little note of that issue, what happened and what you did to fix it. Okay, so the next video is going to be moving on to the second cut of your lino and the second print. So we're going to be overprinting these once we have them dry. Okay, so that's it for this video.